Ever since I was little, I've had a passion for walking. Over the years, I've managed to discover some of the most beautiful and memorable parts of our wonderful country. I've been lucky enough to visit so many magical places, and now I'd love to share them with you. In this series, I'm taking you off to explore some of my favourite walks for all the family. Each one offers a manageable morning or afternoon stroll, gorgeous views, and a well-earned treat of a pub lunch or a picnic. So pull on your boots and join me, Julia Bradbury, on my best walks with a view.
Today I'm taking you off to the ancient undulating Sussex Downs and their lovely glowing Seven Sisters.
This is the spectacular home of the 7 white cliffs that define England. Standing guard is Beachy Head Lighthouse. There's also the strange story of Beltoot, which was moved 50 feet back to save it from the crumbling cliffs. And some even say that the most English of detectives, Sherlock Holmes, may have retired here.
This is where the story of old England began.
And on today's walk, I'm going to find out why this magical landscape was a beacon for so many ancient civilizations, far and wide.
The Romans, the Anglo-Saxons, the Vikings all landed here at Berlin Gap. My walk today starts at the Old Tiger Inn on this classic English village green.
Eastdean is a picturesque Sussex village mentioned in the 11th century Domesday Book. This award-winning Anglo-Saxon hamlet has a village green straight out of the darling buds of May. It's all owned by the Gilbert family estate, who believe that England's most famous detective Sherlock Holmes actually retired here.
Elementary, my dear viewer, and I shall be solving this puzzle later in the walk.
Sherlock Holmes author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle did visit this chocolate box village and was charmed by its green and ancient history. The Went Way sets us off on a walk. This is one of England's oldest routes, dating back to the Anglo-Saxons.
But before we kick off, let's have a look at the route ahead.
Heading out of the Eastdean village green, we quickly find ourselves crossing the fields of the undulating downs, passing through a wood nestling from the sea winds. As we rise over the first down, we walk across the back of the first Seven Sister, Went Hill, passing the Red Barn and descending to the famous Berlin Gap, which offers access to the beach and a National Trust cafe. We then head inland, round the back of Cornish Farm, to explore Wigton's Bottom, before returning to the coast cliffs at Beachy Head and making the final ascent to the spectacular views from Beltoot, the ancient lighthouse turned B&B. A lovely 3-hour walk.
I'm heading out of Eastdean, and that's my first glimpse of the Downs.
That lovely lighthouse is called Beltoot, and it's great that so early in the walk we can see our final destination up ahead. But first, I'm meeting up with Mark Proctor, a gardener on the estate, who can tell me more about this village and its smuggling history.
Hi.
Oh, a nice rhubarb.
Thank you.
This looks like many years of love and labour have gone into this, Mark.
It has. It's a lovely place to work. I've been in Eastdean about 5 years now. I mainly look after the walled garden. Prior to that, I was working up in London, so I used to work for a debt collection company, and fell on my sword when one of the directors said he can make me very much like him in a couple of years, which is when I realised it was time to get out.
That was what you didn't want to happen. You didn't want to be like him.
So I didn't want to be like him, and this was rather a big change.
Now, I know that Went Way has a history of smuggling. Tell me a bit more. What have you learned?
Yes, the chap who built Dippery's got the money from turning King's evidence. So basically, he did the dirty on all these pals and snitched them to the powers that be, and he got wealthy on it and built the Dippery's and the walled garden.
So it's built on dirty money, really?
Built on dirty money, and I'm still digging the dirt.
We should possibly clarify that these days the owners are pure and clean.
Indeed, it's just the soil in the garden that's dirty.
Now, I'm heading in that direction. That's my end point today. Now that you're almost a local, what do you think I should look out for?
On the way through to Beltute Lighthouse, you'll be going past the Seven Sisters.
Not such a secret.
Not such a secret, but when you approach from this angle, you get to see 3.5 buttocks, so keep a lookout for the Seven Sisters bottom.
The Seven Sisters bottom. I'll watch out for that. Thanks, Mark. Happy digging.
Thank you.
Mark was, of course, referring to the dips between the Seven Sisters cliffs, I think. Over there is the ancient Burling Manor, which became a classic Battle of Britain landscape. This powerfully romantic scene of Englishness was used to stir the nation into fighting in a famous patriotic World War II poster by the artist Frank Newbold. Your Britain, fight for it now. That's the spirit. I'm about a mile out of East Dean. Next, I'm heading off under cover of this wooded dip in Went Hill towards this shady, sheltered copse.
I've arranged a clandestine meeting with a Sherlock Holmes expert somewhere up ahead.
So I'm hoping to get a few clues about the blue plaque we saw in the village from successful local novelist James Lovegrove. He's researched the famous sleuth and in fact written his own Sherlock Holmes novels, but he's a bit nervous about saying too much.
I don't want to interrupt your scribbles. More Sherlock Holmes fiction.
Yes, I'm working on one right now.
Let's talk about this blue plaque.
Yes.
It's a bit of a mystery.
That may not be a genuine blue plaque.
Really?
Yeah, that may not be a National Trust or an English Heritage one. It may just be a rather nice gag that the estate owners decided to put on their cottage.
And of course, lots of tourists, American, English, from all over the world, will believe it and love the fact that it's there.
Absolutely, it's all part of the fun of Sherlock Holmes. A lot of people do believe that he was a real person. He's not. He's a made-up character in books. However, he did like to use real places to inform the stories in his books and to make them more authentic and gripping. I mean, in The Hand of the Baskervilles, the Great Grimpen Mire is based on Foxtor Mires in Dartmoor.
What evidence do we have that Conan Doyle visited this area?
We know that he stayed at Burling Manor Farm, which is just over there, as a guest for some time. He also lived in Sussex. He lived in Crowborough, which is a few miles that way. So he knew the area, definitely. Therefore, it seemed quite sensible for him, perhaps, to set Sherlock Holmes' retirement cottage here, because it seemed it's the opposite of London. You know, it's clean, there's clean air, it's countryside, it's quiet.
Tell me how this has all led to you writing about Sherlock Holmes in your book.
Well, I got given the opportunity to write some Sherlock Holmes novels, and I decided I wanted to set one of them in his retirement era, after he'd moved to Sussex. I happen to live in Eastbourne, and I was sitting one day at the green there in East Dean, outside the Tiger Inn, and I saw the plaque on that wall, and I thought it would be fun, you know, to do the book here and to have him in his later life. He's starting to feel his age a bit. His knees are going. Watson's the same, you know. They're old men, but I thought it'd be nice. It's set in 1913, so they're sort of still chasing after the adventures and the fun that they used to have when they lived in London.
So the blue plaque has done its job on many levels.
Absolutely, yes. I even used that cottage actually in the book rather than the correct thing, because it just seemed like fun at the time.
Well, I shall get my magnifying glass out and get on the trail, James.
Right, well, I'm going to give you a copy of my book, Gods of War, which is the one that's set after Holmes retired. That might give you a few clues, a few hints, some ideas.
Thank you very much, James. Well, I'll be quite busy walking, but I'll have a little leaf through along the way.
Well, Sherlock Holmes was certainly no fool. He knew how wonderful the South Downs landscape can be. You couldn't blame him for retiring here. And as I leave the wood behind, I get my first full glimpse of the expansive downs and the sparkling sea ahead. Wow, look at that. Everyone's out enjoying the sunshine. Don't often see the English using their umbrellas like that.
This is a unique view. Over there are the famous Seven Sisters, but we're looking at their bottoms.
Those lovely dips between the 7 famous white cliffs, most often photographed from the sea, all have their own names. One's called Short Bottom, another is called Flat Hill Bottom, and one's even known as Rough Bottom.
I think we're all in agreement. The Seven Sisters have lovely derrieres. Ooh, their faces aren't bad either.
The 7 Sisters are actually 8 now. Due to erosion, a new one's been formed. These chalky cliffs were laid down 65 million years ago, but were only formed 10,000 years ago when the English Channel burst through a wall of chalk to separate England from France after the Ice Age. I'm heading down now to one of the most ancient landing points on the South Down coast. It's been used and fought over for thousands of years by all the invaders of England because this is one of the few accessible routes from the sea through the cliffs.
That's Berlin Gap, the famous sea route for Vikings, Romans and millions of EastEnders who've been coming here on holiday for over a century. I can't wait to get down there and put my bathers on. I'm a couple of miles into my South Downs walk and I've reached Berlin Gap, a popular hub for holidaymakers and invaders for centuries.
Berlin Gap was known as a route to and from the sea as far back as 4,000 years ago. Since then, erosion has shifted the cliffs back almost 4 kilometres, with these beautiful white chalky cliffs eroding almost a metre every year, threatening these 19th century coastguard cottages. Back in 1900, there were 10 of these cottages.
As you can see, there are now only 1, 2, 3, 4 houses left, and this advancing cliff edge is the reason why.
And the cliffs now threaten the ever-popular Berlin Gap National Trust tea room.
You can see how close to the edge the cafe is. They reckon it's got less than a decade left, so you better make that a quick cuppa. Gorgeous views of Seven Sisters, though.
So Londoners love to escape the city and get a bit of blowy beach here at Berlin Gap. There's a fabulous social history on these cliffs. The National Trust Cafe was actually a posh hotel from 1900 until 2010. But in the open fields behind it, the workers would pour down to camp here in the summer. I'm meeting with Natasha Sharm, who pulled together the cafe's National Trust exhibition, which tells great stories about the South Downs campers of years gone by.
Great to see you.
I'm very jealous of your escape from the office.
Oh,
Because
perfect,
this is where you can
isn't
just
it?
come for your little 10 minutes of fresh air every day. It must have been really good fun pulling together all the stories and all the pictures.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful place and people have been coming here for years. They have their family photos, memories that they have of their holidays, and people from who stayed in the Coast Guard cottages on holiday to people who went to the hotel or were camping out on the fields.
Looking back, was there very much a sort of a social divide that, you know, those people who camped, the campers, and then those who stayed in the posh hotel?
Maybe back in the 30s and 40s there would have been, but the hotel has changed hands many times. The people who camped, whose stories we took, varied greatly. And one of the bigger clubs that came down every year were from Hollington in London.
So it was a boys' club?
It was a boys' club set up by a college, Dulwich College, and it was a mission to help the poorer people in London to come out and enjoy some countryside.
So they were regular visitors?
Yes, absolutely. Every year from 1947 till 1960.
How old are they now, those boys?
70s.
Oh, great! Is that a reoccurring theme, that you've got a lot of older people, pensioners, who have been coming here for decades and decades and they just keep returning?
Absolutely. Even local people, just as a quieter beach from Eastbourne, come over here and remember the picnics they had as children, and it's as clear now as it was back then that they had such a good time.
Berlin Gap has clearly been a very special place for people for centuries. Even today, despite the erosion, these crumbling white cliffs are beacons of Englishness. I'm over halfway in, and now our walk heads inland from the cliffs as we explore the quiet, hidden depths of the Downs, away from the bustle and excitement of the sea, in search of a more serene walking mood.
Bizarrely, that's the end of the walk, Bell Toot, but I'm going off down here first to explore Wigden's Bottom.
These shallow valleys offer ideal shelter away from salty sea winds. Perhaps the silent solemnity of these gentle downs is the reason why the ancient tribes of Sussex so often buried their ancestors here. This gentle landscape is littered with burial mounds.
There's a wonderful serene silence in this little dip. Listen to that. Thank you, Wigden's Bottom. You were lovely.
Now, someone else who really appreciates the silence of the South Downs is wild yoga teacher Jackie Wigglesworth. She's travelled across the globe doing outdoor yoga and has brought her exotic approach back here to the Downs. Her life was dramatically changed when she was flown to Hollywood and almost got the female lead in Tomb Raider.
So do you come out here and sort of do the bit of outdoor yoga quite often?
I do occasionally in the, in the more sunny months, just sit outside.
What are some of the more exotic places that you've done your yoga teachings?
Well, Mexico, on the Tulum in the Caribbean there, which was beautiful because we had Mayan sites all around. Taught it in Fiji when I was working there. We lived on this tiny remote island with 30 people living on it called Nanuya Lailai.
So how does the South Downs compare to Fiji?
Like England's up there with anywhere in the world when you're out and it's a day like this, don't you think?
I agree with you. I couldn't agree more. Kerala, Mexico, South Downs, but it could have been LA, couldn't it?
Yes, at one point it could have been LA.
Tell me that story.
After leaving drama school, I got a phone call to come for a casting for Lara Croft, which was bizarre as I'd just left drama school. It was, and so I had all this sort of, interviews on camera and castings, and was told the various things I'd end up doing, like, kickboxing and skydiving and kayaking and climbing and diving. Yeah, I was like, I'm up for it.
Yeah, of course.
And anyway, in the last minute, towards the end, they decided they wanted a name because of money, bums on seats in the cinema and all that stuff, which I totally understand. And so I ended up bizarrely getting offered a job abroad with an environmental sort of project and took it, and that led to leading expeditions and trips in South America and Africa and Mongolia and Fiji, and just a different life.
So in fact, you sort of became the real life Tomb Raider rather than the fictional Hollywood Tomb Raider.
In some ways, it's very sweet of you to say that. Yeah, slightly less salary, but as much adventure.
But fulfillment.
No, it's been great. It's been a good detour, really an adventure.
Right, well, should we have a moment before I go?
Why not? Okay. Taking a few breaths, you can take in the energy from the sun.
So that's got me suitably relaxed for the final steeper stretch of my walk as I make my way back up the Downs towards Beachy Head. Hello, that sign has a familiar theme.
That's it with the bottom jokes. Beachy Head next.
This is a bit like approaching the Grand Canyon when you can't see anything up ahead, but through these bushes and across the green is one of the most iconic sights of southern England.
And there it is, Beachy Head, dwarfing the tiny lighthouse down below.
But without it, the view wouldn't be complete. The tower took 2 years to build and was opened in 1902. It's been used in James Bond movies, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and was host to the Quidditch World Cup in a Harry Potter movie.
But that is not the lighthouse that I'm after today. That is.
So now I'm heading to my final destination of our walk, Beltute Lighthouse, which has its own extraordinary story. This was the original lighthouse, first built in 1832, as much to watch out for smugglers as to protect ships in the fog. But then it was replaced by Beachy Head in 1902 because its light kept getting masked by sea mist. Then the cliffs began to threaten its future.
The thing that tickles me about this place is that in 1999 the owners spent £250,000 moving it 56 feet away from the eroding cliff. If I'd have spent that much money moving it, I'd have moved it to Birmingham.
Imagine the 850-ton building being placed on hydraulic rollers and moved just 17 metres. Even today, it sits very, very close to the edge of England. But at least you can stay here in a B&B with the best views of Beachy Head and Seven Sisters.
Did the earth move for you, darling? It certainly did.
What a magnificent view, east and west. One of the most iconic white cliffs outside of Dover. It's the essence of Englishness, a truly spectacular end to any walk.
This is such an evocative spot. And for those people that poo-poo the south as a walking location, you can't argue with views like that. This has been a perfect walk on a perfect day.